She's one of the poets representing the stanza today. She's been published in well-known magazines and shortlisted multiple times for awards. And as you're about to find out for yourselves, is incredibly talented. I'm very pleased to hand over to her. So over to you, Kelly.
Thank you so much, Maniba, and thank you to Rawanee, Stanza and the Poetry Society for hosting this event. It's a real privilege to read in the Poetry Cafe. I'm going to read poems tonight from my forthcoming collection, which is called The Lost Art of Ironing, and it's going to be published later this year by Hedgehog Poetry Press. It's poems about women's lives, and it's going to open with a poem about my own life, which was triggered when I looked down at my hands one day and thought how much I owed them. To my hands. When I slid into the world, you came out clenched like two walnuts. Then you gradually uncurled, finding your way into mouths, eyes, porridge. Later, you wrapped yourselves round stubby pencils to form my first A's, B's and C's. A few years on, I gnawed your nails in my worried teenage mouth, and your fingers made discoveries in the slick coral heart of me. Soon you moved fast enough to make boys spill their seed. You balanced cigarettes, held soggy joints, trailed in rivers beside lazy boats, fanned out like angelfish as I swam in the South China Sea. You wielded an editor's blue pen, insert, rewrite, delete, stet. Later still, you learned to type on an Amstrad's QWERTY keyboard, sent faxes, never mastered texts, graduated to desktops, laptops. In between, you rubbed off cradle cap, tested milk, too hot or just right, wiped baby's bottoms, smeared on cream, combed thistle down hair, snapped poppers, did minimal washing and ironing, waved tall sons off to university. You are still labouring, pecking away on keyboards, more stiffly now. Your veins form a relief map. Your papery skin has lines that gather on your finger joints. At night, I often wake to find you tightly clenched. So that poem mentioned my day job as a freelance editor, and this is a short poem about some of the work I've been doing recently. Editing memoirs. Sometimes I feel like Florence Nightingale wandering the battlefield at night, hearing dying men calling for their mothers, wishing I could reattach their severed limbs, return the blood to their veins. Looking back, perhaps it was a mistake to say I specialised in memoirs. I never thought so many wounded lives would fling themselves into my inbox, beg me to heal them, arrange them neatly on the page. So the book will also have poems about other women's lives, and this one is about a very famous poet who has always inspired me. If Emily Dickinson were my best friend, I'd visit her in Amherst, climb the wooden stair and knock gently on her bedroom door. I'd ask her to tell me her secret, how to distill 200 words into 20, how to capture a truth before it slipped away. I'd tell her the sun was shining, book 2 tickets to Paris, take her to the Musée Rodin, suggest she unpin her hair. We'd go to a bar in Montparnasse, drink gin and tonic from big glasses, talk about how women's lives had changed and not changed. I tried to take away her sadness, even though her sadness made me love her. I'd ask if she knew she'd become an icon, if that was what she wanted. Then I'd take her back to her room, make sure she had all she needed: a jug of water, a Bible, notebook and pen, a choice about how to live and when. And this is one about another famous woman, although she's more famous for the painting she appeared in than under her own name. And I think you'll guess which painting it is. An enigma resolved. If I stare at you hard enough, perhaps I can time travel through a wormhole back to a day in 1504, when sitting for your portrait was no longer a novelty. Your weekly visits had continued for more than a year, and you'd grown to loathe the smell of paint. You settled yourself in a wooden chair, tucked a faded velvet cushion behind the small of your back, sighed and arranged your hands the way he liked them, right over left. At first, you tried making conversation, but he seemed more interested in the skulls on his shelves. So you emptied your mind, sank into soporific silence, waited for the hours to slide away. The weight of centuries pressed down on you, squeezed the air from your lungs. No sound but the clock and Leonardo's slippered feet shuffling back and forth. Nothing of interest at all, until you saw, on the wall, a fly struggling in a web, and almost smiled. And this is the title poem from the collection. And I think ironing and editing have some things in common. They both involve smoothing out creases in a way. The lost art of ironing. I usually fold things straight from the tumble dryer, but yesterday I left some napkins in too long and they came out scrunched as old tissues. Nothing for it but to resurrect the dusty iron. And I felt almost joyful, pressing down on the hot metal, transforming crumpled cloth into neat squares. I thought of all the women before me, ironing each day, smoothing out life's creases, creating order from heaps of chaos. My mother-in-law lived through the war and ironed everything: dishcloths, towels, underpants, every bit of fabric in the house. She couldn't talk about her feelings, but she ironed beautifully. Her children knew she loved them because their sheets were always smooth as glass. And finally, a little poem which also uses fabric metaphors, but this time to talk about the environmental crisis that we're all facing. And this poem was printed in the 100th issue of Dyslexia magazine with a commentary by Linda France, which I was really pleased about. So, in my mind, I've been to Antarctica, and I understand the way frozen water forms luminous threads, the way it weaves blankets of snow and sheets of ice, the way glaciers shift in their sleep, moaning like whales, the way they lose parts of themselves, slipping away into oceans, the way Antarctica is Earth dreaming, a white tablecloth shaken out, the way we keep pulling at the threads, the way it will come undone.
That was some incredible poetry. Really enjoyed all of it, especially the Emily Dickinson one. Thank you very much for that. All right, next up, we have Margaret Beston.
I'd also like to add my thanks to Muniba and to the Poetry Society for making this evening happen. My first poem is about the first words you learn as a child. And although I grew up in England, my mother came from Dublin and my father from America. So some of their vocabulary was very different to my friends' parents. I also went to a Catholic school, so Latin crept in, plus the teachings of the church. Self-portrait as a child's dictionary. I learned artificial at an early age. It was personified in the look-alike leg propped in a corner of his bedroom. Something to do with war, or was it army? I didn't know the difference. He taught me fractions, how a quarter was 15 minutes on the clock, but 25 cents in a US dollar. He spoke of skyscrapers and sidewalks in New York, but loved the safe pavements of our country town. I struggled to decipher Olia or Hakia on postmarks from this place my mother spoke about as home. She called me Alana, and my Irish name Mairead, gave me Kaylee and Fáilte, taught me the few phrases she knew in that distant language. I slipped them into my lexicon like a special secret. Nuns explained the meaning of veritas, stitched in black and white on my beret. I must follow the path of truth, be ready for the day of judgment, when living and dead would rise together in glory. I believed that was when my father would find the leg he lost. My mother finally see the family she left behind. My next poem is about friendship, and some friendships are unexpected, and this is about one of those. Never meant to be friends. Call me when you get to Paris. Home for Christmas, already every inch the Parisienne. Suddenly out of place in our local pub, you scribble a string of numbers in the margin of a newspaper. I take the torn off scrap just to be polite, not sure you mean it. Decide you're the last person I'd ever call, even if I'm homesick, lonely, until I am. I'm surprised how thrilled you sound, how warm I feel to hear a voice from home. You invite me for supper, refuse to let me go back to my cheap hotel, insist I stay the night, insist I take the mattress from your divan, you sleep on the base. And so I stay that night, the next night, and many more. We lie at opposite ends of the darkening room, blankets pulled up tight against the January chill. Our voices fill the empty space between us as we share our thoughts, our fears, hopes for the future. Sometimes, on a wakeful winter night, I still hear your voice. Can you hear mine? I lived and worked in Canada for a while, and this poem mentions Canada, but it's also about the things we have to learn at school and what things we actually remember by heart. Once she had to memorize the chemical elements of soil, learn how to measure the height of trees using sine and cosine, and how to address a letter to a bishop. Information lost now in dusty box files in a corner of her brain, with lists of Latin verbs and conjugations, the attributes of the Virgin Mary, and which feast day a priest wore rose or purple. But she remembers maples, braided from cinnabar to porphyry, stretching across the Laurentian hills like reels of silko in a haberdasher's drawer. The rustle of raven wings through cedars as an Indian canoe skims the surface of a turquoise lake. castles carved from blocks of ice, snow on the windshield as she left. The title of my next poem, Le temps viendra, means the time will come, and it's the inscription in Anne Boleyn's Book of Hours, a prayer book. You will remember that Anne Boleyn was Henry VIII's second wife. The book survived thanks to her friends who hid it after she was beheaded by the king. It's on display at Hever Castle, which is very close to where Sarah and I live in Tunbridge. And there's just one word in the poem that I didn't come across, so maybe you haven't either. It's haptic, and it's a word that relates to touch, because in medieval times, touching the holy words was part of the devotion. Le temps viendra. Smudges in parchment margins under ultraviolet light lead us on a journey across centuries. Reveal how your friends defied a king set to erase you from history. They smuggle away your book of hours, pass it cautiously amongst their loyal band of women. Fingers move reverently over your haptic marks, keep you close as they practice their devotions. Conscious of the risk, they add inscriptions, sign their name by yours, prove memories are not destroyed at a king's command, or a spirit quelled by one sweep of a sword. And my final poem is also the title of my new collection, and it's Kintsugi. Kintsugi is the Japanese art of repairing pottery with lacquer mixed with gold, which makes the object more valuable. And I wrote this poem 4 years ago when I had a serious accident. So in my case, Kintsugi has made my life more valuable. Kintsugi. He wants to put his head in his hands and scream. A moment's inattention, slippery fingers, the dish crashes onto tiles, a lifetime of memories shattered on the floor. Here is a sunny wedding day after a week of snow. The carbonara he cooked when they came home with their first baby. Summer salads in the garden, dried fruit, exotic spices, soaked in brandy for the cake each Christmas. He gathers up the fragments, sets them out like a jigsaw on the kitchen surface, matches them, glues with epoxy resin mixed with fine pure gold, smooths and burnishes. Remodeled into an enhanced form, a work of art, he displays it safely beside other treasures, its cracks transformed into precious scars.
Thank you, Margaret, for those heartfelt words, and also very thought-provoking. You know, when you spoke about how you a sense of identity that you got from your mother, but wasn't entirely your own. I think there was a lot of thought-provoking, poetry over there. So thank you very much. Our next few poets will be joining us online. We'll be starting with Shahryar. Now, Shahryar is somebody who's very talented with words. He's also an award-winning musician. He's joining us online from Islamabad, and his rhythmic poetry and aware choice of words is something that listeners will really enjoy. And I'm going to hand over to him to share his work.
Thank you so much, and I hope you can hear me fine. So I'm going to start with a poem called Soft Light. As a former advertising man, I can tell you that lighting has a lot to do with, making everything look good around us. But also, I thought of that as a metaphor, for using things as a filter when we try to befriend denial. So this one is called soft light. Under a soft light, they conducted a scan. The cancer had spread to the salivary gland. Under a soft light, a needle crept into your bloodstream and traced your condition back to your family genes. Under a soft light, you played your tune, you kept your chin up ever so high. Under a soft light, the reception was bitter. The reviews left you with a river to cry. Under a soft light, we warm our blankets. Sleep is a friend in the worst of times. Under a soft light, they tried the common man and found him guilty of high crimes. Under a soft light, you can park your doubts, walk the dog across a block or two. Under a soft light, you can entertain these people you call friends. There are quite a few. Under a soft light, you can hide behind aging wrinkles and growing fears. Under a soft light, you're almost invisible. It's open season for failed careers. Under a soft light, you got married to a fairly likable guy. Under a soft light, he made love to you. Now you want out. Well, you're welcome to try. Under a soft light, you became a bird of prey. They're reporting 32 dead in the Khyber agency today. Under a soft light, we voted for a smiling stooge. His legacy, all too gray. Under a soft light, blood money shines like the twinkling eye of a newborn babe. Under a soft light, the child grew up. He's got a bomb strapped to his waist. Under a soft light, there was an ambush. No one came through. No one dared. Under a soft light, a prophet spoke, but his message was too multi-layered. Under a soft light, God really loves you, yet you trade with the devil. You must be slow. Under a soft light, Adam took to Eve. Oh, but that was such a long time ago. So that was a soft light. And then I'll move on to my next poem, which is called Bench. Now, Bench is a bit autobiographical, I guess. I guess I was seeing someone at one point, and we used to, hang around parks, which is what normally people do in Pakistan, public parks where they can hang around. And then we used to start, we started hanging around, and we found this bench. So I thought I'd write this, it's very anecdotal. So it's called Bench, where we used to share a few moments, I suppose. So Bench. Sun-kissed, breathless, a thirst too strong to quench. We went looking for shade. We found a bench. Parked under a neem tree, a quiet, calm oasis. We could remain stationary, yet still go places. Our words became our wings between epic journeys, the little things, past conquests, recent regrets. We witnessed a million sunsets. Fed birds until they migrated. You waited, I hesitated. The earth made its revolutions, it didn't turn in our favor. Maybe there was something to celebrate, but nothing to savor. Today I passed by our bench, a murderer most vile, returning to the scene of the crime. Saw a sad-eyed stranger sitting there, his smoke rings traveled back in time. He studied the cracks on the roof, ignored lessons scribbled on the blackboard, blundered through life with an F grade. He's finally learning to take notes. Karma is the best teacher. It answers if you raise both your hands. Swear and shout to an absentee God. Find meaning in empty one-night stands. The brilliant student in the front row runs a successful tech firm now. The flunky, oh so nonchalant, eats leftovers from a restaurant. Tools come in handy during unemployment. Throw your favorite monkey wrench. The world will happily relegate you to the backbench. Tiring, perspiring, the athlete struggles to have any impact on the game. Stadium lights in his eyes, loud boos from the crowd. How did it come to this? What trick did he miss? His fiery coach emerges from his battle trench, tells him his time is up, points to the bench. Judgment Day is finally here. How will the defendant plead? The ledger looks heavy. Angels and demons lead. Good deeds spread their fragrance. Evil sins leave a stench. The jury has reached a verdict. You may approach the bench. So that was bench. Just a concept of what you can do just with that word alone. And my last poem is going to be, it's called The Third World Blues. I'm a huge fan because I'm a musician. So I always think, in terms of meter, in terms of how the African Americans used to, approach probably America as a new continent and I suppose a foreign land. But in Pakistan, I suppose I'm one of the few people, many people, I suppose, who suffer from the third world blues. So I just thought I'd write about the third world blues. You have champagne, plain ice for me. Lagos likes its jaundice and hepatitis C. Vegetables stunted as soon as they take root. Pesticides kill the unsuspecting fruit. No checks and balances, only customers in queues buying into the third world blues. You keep your license, I carjack for fun. My uncle in Harare gifted me his gun. The world's my oyster, but I've never eaten one. Law and Order is just a TV show. VPN totally rules. Another season of the third world blues. You can have Cupid, we marry family in Egypt. Make lots of babies, frequent the pyramids. Women are free to abort their careers. She used to dream of dating Tom Cruise. Now she feels the cold embrace of the third world blues. Meanwhile, in Pakistan, you have your divisions. Well, we are on the same page. Ethnic is just a clothing brand. PSL is all the rage. Minorities only play dead. All the worlds are stage. The British Raj used Chaudhry Saab to tighten the noose. Freedom is fuzzy in the third world blues. Thank you so much.
Enjoy that poetry and the thought-provoking words. Really, particularly, I like the lighting concept and how you brought in the concept of befriending denial. Now, next up, we have a poet who has a verse for every occasion. And having known him through Rawanee for the past few years, I don't exaggerate a bit over here. Nadir Feroz Khan joins us online today from Karachi. He writes equally well in Urdu and English, has had his work featured in multiple publications, and is co-founder of the popular Pakistani publications, Desi Writers Lounge and Lakir magazine. And I will add over here, he's additionally an unofficial advisor to Rawanee, though I suspect that's probably because he's not given that much of a choice in the matter. So over to you, Nadir.
Thank you very much, Muniba, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I have just one poem I'll be reciting, and it's kind of unique for me in the sense that I wrote it extemporaneously in rhyme and I didn't make any major edits to it. That's not usually how it works. I mean, when you're writing in rhyme, usually you try to, edit the word and get the best out of it. But this is not how it happened, at least in its original Urdu version. I'll be reading both the Urdu and the English version. And the background of the poem is kind of unique too, in the sense that it so happened that I was tricked into an uncomfortable and embarrassing situation by someone close. So it was the holy month of Ramzan, and it was during the initial COVID period back in 2020. So the anxiety and emotions were high, and so was the spiritual connection. So while I was extremely disappointed, and something else was nagging me, which was the curfew which had been imposed in the Indian occupied Kashmir. So while I was in this stark contrast between disappointed myself and the whatever the situation that the Kashmiris were facing, so I had a short conversation with God, and something like, "Hey God, look, I am saddened yet I'm smiling." And how exactly I said that will shortly follow. But this is the interesting part, is where how the spiritual high features is that I blurted the next stanza as well right there and then. So it's like I realized that I was actually, something was forming in my head, the first stanza and then the second one. So I was driving while this happened. So I parked the car. I took out my phone and started typing, and the 4 stanzas which I wrote came in quick succession, came back home. And then the next morning I wrote the final 5th stanza. And just as I read the poem now, just give you a slight context. For us Muslims, some of us believe that when you're passing away, if you're smiling, you probably are seeing angels take you away. And some of us also believe that if you're really pious, you will actually see God face to face in heaven. So I'm going to read the English and Urdu version together. Here it goes. It's titled, Bear Witness, My Lord, Dekh Le Mere Rab. देख ले मेरे रब, bear witness, my Lord. हालांकि है सबब, there's utter discord. है दर्द भी गजब, this heart gets sawed. मुस्कुरा रहा हूं मैं, while I smile back. और रोज हो के शब, the symphony of time. रुकते नहीं ये लब, recounts each suffered crime. माफ करके सब, this form forgives in rhyme. मुस्कुरा रहा हूं मैं, while I smile back. है चाहत गो अजब, wishing it be the case. उतारें कब्र में जब, at the final resting place. जान ले जमाना तब, they stare at my face. मुस्कुरा रहा हूं मैं, while I smile back. और जब हो मुलाकात, and when we finally meet, हो जाए ऐसी बात, won't it be a treat? मुस्कुरा रहा हो तू, with a smile you greet. मुस्कुरा रहा हूं मैं, while I smile back. ये नज्म पढ़ते साथ, for verses became a song. जुड़ गए हैं हाथ, that we all sang along. गुनगुना रहे हैं सब, forgiving each other's wrong. मुस्कुरा रहा हूं मैं, while I smile back. देख ले मेरे रब, bear witness, my Lord. मुस्कुरा रहा हूं मैं, that I've smiled back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadir, for that incredible delivery. Very powerful. Our next reciting poet is somebody who somebody who is very well respected in the literary and linguistic circles in both Wales and, in the South Asian community. Hamad Ryan is a poet, a writer, and a translator who enjoys many talents, speaks many languages, and his published works include a well-received novel and poetry translation, and he's continually working to produce more writing. He joins us online today from Cardiff in Wales, and we are beyond honored that he has made time for us today. So over to you, Hamad.
Thank you very much, Muniba. Thank you for the very kind words and welcome. My first poem is a translation of a Saraiki poem by one of the most famous Saraiki poets, contemporary Saraiki poets, Dr. Ashu Lal. But before I read the original poem and the translation, I would like to add a caveat about translations and poetry in translation. One of the most famous Welsh poets, Menna Elfyn, has said, Darllen cerdd mewn cyfeithiad fel ydi fel cael cusan trwy hankes. Reading a poem through a translation is like kissing through a handkerchief. So I thought I should add that caveat first. So the poem is called Chudhe, and the title means the unclean ones. That's how I've translated it. And it's about a community of people who generally work as cleaners in Pakistan, in some areas of Pakistan. And they are referred to as chudhe, which is a derogatory term, which translates that as unclean. So I'll read the poem in Saraiki first. Asamel arudi jagdi, apne sir te chai, sadi jhok nakai, पिपलियां नाल बुहारी दिती, फांडे धो चमकाए, अपने तंदा मांस पकाया, लख स्नेहे मुत्ते, वतवी कहना साडे कट्ठे, बह पथारी खादा, असा चूढ़े जग उधरके, दाज साडी मादा, संगती निके लादा. The unclean ones, carrying the dirt and rubble of the world, with no place to call home, with brooms made of pipple, we swept the yard clean, washed the pots and cooked the meat of our own bodies. We sent 1,000 missives and messages, and yet no one came to eat with us. We, the unclean ones, we, the wretched of the earth, our mother's dowry is the only companion we've known since our childhood. The next poem is also a translation by me of a very famous ghazal, Urdu ghazal by a very well-known Urdu poet of the 18th century, Mir Taqi Mir. I'll read the original poem in Urdu first, the ghazal, and then I'll read my translation. उल्टी हो गई सब तदबीरें, कुछ न दवा ने काम किया, देखा इस बीमारी दिल ने आखिर काम तमाम किया, अहदे जवानी रो रो काटा, पीरी मेली आंखें मूंद, यानी रात बहुत थे जागे, सुबह हुई आराम किया, नाहक हम मजबूरों पे ये तुहमत है मुख्तारी की, चाहते हैं सो आप करे हैं, हमको अवस बदनाम किया, सारे रिंद ओबाश जहां के तुझसे सुजूद में रहते हैं, बांके टेढ़े तिरछे तीखे सबका तुझको इमाम किया, मीर के दीनों मजहब को अब पूछते क्या हो, उनने तो कशका खींचा, तैर में बैठा, कब का तरके इस्लाम किया. And all those plans did come to grief, the pain no cure could heal, the heart's affliction, love and loss had ended my ordeal. I washed away my youth in tears, but aging closed my eyes. At night I stayed awake, and as the morn came, rested, sigh. Should we, fate's victims, be accused unjustly of free will, while she smears us as she does, besmirched and unfulfilled? Degenerates of the world view you with awe, their lofty king. Wily, crooked, shifty, sour, to you their tributes bring. Ask not Mir's sect or of his creed, beyond repair is he. Proud he sits with saffron brow in shrines of heresy. And my last poem is a very short poem in Welsh. and it's very special to me because it's my first ever poem in Welsh. I came across a very interesting term. It's a type of cress, the herb, and it's called berwr Caer Salem in Welsh, which literally means Jerusalem cress. And I read the translation in English is something like London Rocket, London Rocket, sorry. Right, so yeah, the poem is about, it's about voice and about Jerusalem and about spirit. I wouldn't translate it. I'm not going to translate it, but I'll read the poem. I hope some of you will be able to understand, if not all. Achlais o'r mynydd, mae berw'r Caer Salem yn tyfu ym Mangard, ac mae'r ysbryd eisiau hedfan eto. Mae Moeshe wedi gohri ei ffordd ar y mynydd, wedi gadael ei lais ar ôl. Ond ydy ei lais yn wir? Gwelais I addar yn syrthu ar y ddeiar, heb addennid, heb draed, heb leisiau. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hamad, for the very talented multilingual delivery. I think it's a real talent to be able to write in multiple languages and to translate poetry from multiple languages. Thank you very much for that. Now, before we move on, I'll mention that this is also the point when we conclude our online recitations and move on to the last few in-person ones. I really want to thank Sharia, Nadir, and Hamad for joining us online, particularly knowing that for two of them, it's past 1 a.m. where they are. and Hamad has a very busy schedule. So thank you, all of you. Rest assured, we will continue to share the rest of the event online for the online attendees as we move forward with the next few recitations. And next up, we have Kathleen Jones. Kathleen is a committed environmentalist. She's passionate about creating a more equal and diverse society. She's a poet and biographer living in the Lake District and the second poet who's representing the Cumbria Stanza today. She's authored 2 poetry collections and 3 pamphlets. So over to you, Kathleen.
Can you all hear me okay? Great. So, hello and salam alaikum. This is one of my environmental. I find I'm writing more and more about the environment at the moment. I travel quite a lot, so I notice the effects of it. I've just come back from New Zealand, where on South Island, for the first time, 2 of their major rivers are completely dry as a result of a lack of snow melt and a 3-month drought. And they're very, very worried about it. So this is, imagine a world without ice. Imagine a world without ice. Imagine endless blue. Imagine an absence done with extinction. Polar bear, penguin, walrus, whale. Unfrozen oceans, where once you could walk from shore to shore. Then imagine the absence of cool. Imagine having to imagine the drip, drip of glaciers or icebergs the size of 100 Titanics. Now imagine the absence of language for this. Frost, flow, glacier, icicle, Arctic, the Inuit words for snow, the loss of flake, blizzard, drift, whiteout, and the present tense of the verb to ski. Imagine the lack of glitter, ice-patterned glass, the creak and crack of winter puddles, the clink and dazzle of crystals hanging from a lip of rock. The statistics are pretty startling, actually. 3 species an hour across the planet are disappearing, as David Attenborough was pointing out recently in one of his documentaries. 3 species an hour. Already, as I write this, another one is gone. A yellow tree frog in the deep throat of an Amazonian orchid. A small corpse, the size of my fingernail perhaps, floating on a micro lake of sweet rain. And then, while I make coffee, a coral polyp on a shallow reef silently sheds its algae, an unknown species, dying unrecorded in a warming sea. Now, it is only a matter of watching the clock, counting down how long it takes to get from one unspectacular beetle thrashing its legs for the last time unobserved on the forest floor to us. So it worries me a lot. I spent quite a lot of my life living in the Middle East, and I went out there first in 1968, and there were very few Europeans out there then, and very few European women. I think I was one at that time where we were. I was one from about 5. It was quite new. And of course I had to learn Arabic. And it's a difficult language because it has a completely different alphabet. So I've never, I learned a bit of Greek at school, but apart from that, nothing. And Arabic really is unique. The only way I could really learn it was to imagine each of the characters as images, as pictures. And so this is about that. This is the Aleph. On the board, the teacher draws an upright. Every letter has 4 forms on its own, at the beginning, the middle, and the end. Noon is a looped curve with a dot. Now I can write Anna. Aleph, Nun, Aleph, the word for I. Ba is a boat floating over a rock, and here is the Ta. Do you see that it is like a boat with 2 people in it? Arabic is cursive. The letters flow across, curling round the lines, right to left, a boat, 2 dots, my pen follows. Dal, Jim, Sahad, Lam, Kaf. I want to know what happens when we get to the end. Now we will go for the S sounds, she says, drawing something like a W, a curly tail. She adds 3 dots. It becomes a small animal, making the sound trees make in the wind as it reverses itself across the page. Where you put the dot alters the meaning of the word. I learn how to write son, grandfather, and God, but not the words for by myself or how to be stoic in hard times. I was married to someone who went to 3rd world countries. His expertise was in going to countries which were totally uninhabitable from a Western point of view, and then doing them up until they were vaguely habitable, and then moving on to the next one, needed doing up. Some of them were very unstable, and I lived through quite a few coups, and on one occasion had to escape when he wasn't there. And this is Closing the Borders. It took nerve to bribe her way onto the last plane, stacking the notes on the counter, watching the clerk's face until his hand reached out. Or maybe it wasn't the money, but the way the child was crying, the way she picked her up, rocked her, all of them afraid. It took nerve to watch the tops of the K-pop trees brushing the landing gear through a hole in the floor, the plane a wreck, the pilot a veteran Aussie with trembling hands and bloodshot eyes, who asked no questions when she sat on the crew seat at the back, the child asleep in her lap. It took nerve to arrive in a strange place, up country, landing on the edge of the bush among the herds of wildebeest and startled gazelle. Nerve she'd never known she had, knowing no one and nowhere to stay. Sharing a cigarette with the pilot and a can of warm Fanta, the child running on the grass. Better than hiding under the bed with a machete, the handle slick with sweat, and only the garden boy between her and the gardens. Sometimes a moment in the world seems in utter chaos, and it can be very easy to despair. And I was feeling very despairing, and I picked up a book by someone called Rebecca Solnit called Hope. And it was very comforting to read that hope, which I'd always thought of as a very passive kind of thing, a bit like a lottery ticket, you hope to win, to find out that it actually, hope can be an active force that we can use to change things. So this is just a short poem based around a quote from her book. There is no hope, the message read, but my heart said, there is always hope. Not blind hope, not the cross your fingers and pray hope, but the hope that breaks down the door to the future with an axe.
Very much, Catherine. Some beautiful poetry over there, and really enjoyed, listening to Imagine a World with No Ice. Well, I say enjoy, but I think it's quite alarming, right? So thank you for that. Next up, we have Sarah Davis reciting. She is the second representative of the Roundel stanza here today. Sarah, like all the poets before her, is also very talented. She's been writing poems regularly for about 10 years now, and she's had them printed in multiple magazines and anthologies. So over to you, Sarah.
Thank you. Hello, I'd like to first of all thank Monifa for organising this lovely event. I've got 5 poems to read. As Monifa says, I've been writing poetry for about 10 years, and the first poem I've chosen was actually the first of mine to be printed in a magazine. So I'm rather fond of it. It echoes the environmental theme, but imagining what it might be like if everything does go wrong. Imagine leaving the Earth to find a home on another planet. It's called The Sad Pioneers, an Elegy for Earth. We shelter beneath this metallic sky, tending our hydroponic crops. We look back across the void, take the time to count our loss. Of spume-blown cliffs punching out of the sea where orcas swam, black, white, under a purple sky. Of a moon that bloomed over the cliff tops to show us the pathway falling rutted and steep down to the harbour, to ships at the quay. Looking back, we count the loss of a small desert town, its patchwork of ochre and white, with sun-heated walls shading a yard, a pool full of fish, and one scented tree where travellers rested, shared tales in the night. Of a lakeside in springtime, wildfowl returning with a clatter of wings, of ripples that murmur to the jetty, where barefooted children splash, dipping for fry. We count the loss of creatures and crowds, tangles of lives, jangling cities, the babel of tongues, temples, towers, poems and songs, of a light to guide us home. Sheltering here beneath this metallic sky, now the hydroponic harvest's home, we have time, all time, to count our loss. We are the saddest pioneers. My next poem is about an unforgettable experience I was lucky enough to have watching the whale migration out of Sydney Harbour. And it's called Humpback. The wind slaps the white-edged sea. Our tourist boat, goaded, plunges and bucks. Children shriek. Boys cling to rails, the cautious grip a seat. Engine off, we drift. The horizon folds and lifts. Cameras are primed. Others sit, their faces nipped and pale. Seabirds in distant spirals flash a code of flickering wings. Among the white tops, the water gels, becomes a grey hump, glides outside. The birds circle closer. A lazy shape rolls from the waves, raising a graceful pectoral fin. Jetting breath exhales a mist. Birds cry overhead. A whale takes flight. Airborne, it twists, dives, with a thrust of its totemic tail to be swallowed in an arc of white. The whales head north. Seabirds drift away. Beneath the blank sky, we are alone. The children fall quiet. No one speaks as the engine thrums to make the slow turn home. My next poem is autobiographical. I was very young, but this particular summer and place is fixed in my memory. This poem was shortlisted for the Canterbury Festival Poet of the Year prize, and I was absolutely thrilled to be included in that. Dorchester Court, Herne Hill. Huge to her child's view, brick blocks sliced by windows in balconied layers, about an island of orange flowers, where a fountain spilt only dust. That grassy summer, her mother discovered the flat roof, charmed the caretaker for his key. Up there they basked, moving with the shadows. Her mother's oiled body gleamed. The child skipped between vents and turrets. Asphalt toasted her feet. She kept tadpoles on the cool balcony, watched their legs grow, wept as frogs trickled away. She made a monkey friend. They played peekaboo window to window. She envied its tail, its neat red jacket. When rain darkened the asphalt, her mother packed up. They moved on, left Art Deco elegance to crumble on its bones. She often thought of the hot roof, the flower island, the frogs, but she missed the monkey. My next poem is another autobiographical one. It was my response to risks of walking home late at night when I was a student. Sadly, nothing much has changed for what young women these days. I called it the potato coat. I found it 40 years ago in a discount store near Tooting Bec. It hung with a dozen more in a rainbow of muddy shades to blend with bricks or paving slabs. Quilted for a warming look, it was potato colour, potato shaped. The floppy hood concealed my face. Worn with jeans with heavy boots, it sagged a little below my knees. I often left it as it fell for the cat to tread, curl into, sleep. Then threads came loose in tattered loops. The lining dropped below the cuffs. But it had no belt to make a waist. Its secret pocket held keys and cash, a plastic lighter, cigarettes. No bag needed to be caught or grabbed. I hid safely inside my shapeless coat, an ungendered shadow, walking home through London's half-lit winter streets. My last poem was published in the Roundel anthology, Links in the Chain. It celebrates a moment at a Bruce Springsteen concert and also celebrates youth and middle age. Springsteen. Shooting the rapids, we cling to a raft of songs as the girls ride shoulders while boys punch the sky. Linking arms, lest we fall headlong down a precipice of tears, tonight we are truly born to run. Pooling and churning, the music rises high, so high, breaking in a cascade of notes. Drowning, I turn to you, find you singing, though your voice is lost. Then, in one calm drop of a moment, I see who we were, know who we are. Certain I would not turn back the tide. Even in the smoothness of our youth, I know we were never so cool as this. Standing here by your side, adrift on a wave of tenderness, suddenly I find myself overwhelmed.
Sarah, some beautiful imagery, some beautiful poetry over there. And now it's time for me to reintroduce myself to all of you, this time as a poet. And here I think it would be fitting for me to tell you a little bit about myself as a person. Because as it happens with most poets, we write mostly to our lived experiences, personal and observed. So I have grown up in urban Pakistan, in Karachi to be specifically, and now I'm living the diaspora life. So a lot of my poems are about, everything I've observed. Now, for those of you less familiar with it, urban Pakistan comprises a 1% elite that is very disconnected from the other 99% of the population. Now, of course, the stats may vary slightly, and this is a generalization, but this is a general pattern that is over there. And the other 99% deal with deplorable levels of poverty, injustice, and violence. But oftentimes the people, they're actually beautiful people, beautiful souls who actually deserve to have a wonderful life. But sadly, I've always noticed that many of the 1% appear not to care much for the others. This, I am starting to realize now, is not entirely different from how the entire world is structured. The poems I will share here today speak to the themes of feminism and to wider social injustice back home and in the world. The first poem that I will share today is an act of rebellion of sorts. It's an expression of frustration at the ridiculous demands of perfectionism that are placed on women, and at the absurdity of people thinking of women as being fragile. This poem is called Glassland. Her tiptoes have always been light, for it's glass that she spread on, frosted, tainted, or painted bright, crystal dreams she's ever fed on, rucksack and hood as she trudges through lands of overgrown grass and boots filled with sand. Dr. Jekyll in the frame marches to Hyde's command, for she's a bohemian in a pragmatic land. Delicate, keep your gait and paint well your face. Your voice, keep in low sound, let your long dress trail the ground, and as you twist a dainty twirl, don't let fall out of place your curl. For a woman good does only as she should, so never let escape a frown. To dainty slippers, let your feet be bound. Glass slippers, the intricate, beaded kind, cut through her skin, left their marks behind. But boots, heavy, ugly, and worn, shield the blows and she trudges along. Ambition should come wrapped with your pretty dress. You must win it all. The world does repeatedly stress. Money is a bullseye, so you can purchase more charm. Hair streaks and balayage do China dolls no harm. Eight up the steep climb, beckon beaming lights. Reflective glass blinds their sight. The glass ceiling sits high, but her neck she won't strain. Translucent this lie, she'll march to her own refrain. For when she peers outside, the world is far and wide, and though but little she knows, the road will take her where it goes. To paint and to strut, could there be a worse rut? For the female who isn't born to do as they say she should, and the patriarchs bellow rules that make no sense, and the capitalists' false promises know no ends. In a world of glass, they say throwing stones can injure your bones, but they fail to see hope suffocate in hearts cold and glassy. So glass and the feigning of glass shudder as they see shattered glass as she breaks free. The next 2 poems that I'm going to read focus on the more serious themes of social injustice. The first of these is about the Greek boat tragedy that took place last year. It was an incident that cast a very dark shadow on humanity and what it has come to. Over 300 migrants drowned off the coast of Greece after more than an hour of signaling distress to the coast. So there was somebody or a number of people on the coast who made the decision that those 300 lives were not worthy of being saved. Later, journalistic investigations revealed how some migrants, Pakistani ones in specific, had been mistreated by others on the basis of their nationality. This poem is called A Teardrop in a Vast Sea. They were warned of the choppy waters in the rough seas, but they said they've always lived their lives neck deep. Many a mighty boat lives on the ocean bed, but they say at rock bottom, we've been born and bred. Traffickers say they're not to blame. Migrants are aware this is a risky game. Not on us, say the Coast Guards, doing as we're told. To think they'd be welcome here, that's mighty bold. For some boats, burn boats, return boats, are ever replied with little hope, and yet somehow they still seek the boats, desperate to escape their lands of no bridges, ablaze lined with trenches and ditches, pining for the boats, praying for the boats, paying for the boats, till one day they're called to a boat, lump in their throats. And then, crowded on the boat, mocked on the boat, locked on the boat, for oxygen they choke, no water for their dry throats, till a flood of it gushes through. For people of boats, there's often no choice but to sink or float. The waves may wash some bodies ashore, of those for whom a doom boat was the closest thing to home they'd ever known. A teardrop disappears into a vast sea, perhaps in heaven the angels weep. Continuing the theme of social injustice, the next poem is, unfortunately, a lot more grim. It would be quite absurd and inauthentic for me to stand here and talk about feminism and glass ceilings without acknowledging a much more pressing issue that women in a certain part of the world are facing right now. Women who are giving birth without any kind of pain relief, any kind of medical care or hygiene. Men, women, and children in an endless, senseless war with no medicines, no food, no shelter, many losing their family members or seeing them badly injured. Over 30,000 have been killed, approximately 13,000 of them children. Many others have had their limbs blown off. My next poem is an acknowledgement of the suffering of those who are at present most in need of our voices. I wrote it in the festive season in December, and it is perhaps a desperate plea to the 1%. Frost ices our hearts, unsmiling sun thaws through, multi-latitudes. Festive lights sprinkled around, like stardust of the prettiest kind. Dark falls early, goes unnoticed, well concealed by sparkling lights. Walking through miles of concrete splendor, offices, malls beckon to the coveted life. The air is drunk on jolly carols. A jarring scream, my brain does smite. We're dreaming of a white Christmas in colors green and red, yet in my nightmares, sobbing pools of blood, images of thousands injured and dead. Our world, billions. Santa brings presents to some, at most millions. There are no-go spaces for reindeer too. Some places even 8 can't go. I'm told to be silent and not say more, for ugly truths are not meant to be told. I'm struggling to participate more, though I'm doing my best to try. I don't want to be cheerless, but my truth is, I never stop thinking about the genocide. Civilized, peaceful, our world, undid our truth. Lies we bought into. I've been unimpressed since long back, ever since the mind started to know. Yet the eyes cannot now unsee, and the truth my heart does seek. Who was made poorer for the wealth, and whose world darkened for the lies? And when it comes to my people, could you at least pause to think twice? And on this sadly grim note, we've reached almost the end of the event, almost, as we still have a few thank yous to say, and a special bonus recitation at the end. But before I move on to thank specific individuals, I want to thank all of you over here for making the time to come here today, for being with us, and for being a really wonderful audience to perform for. So thank you very much for that. I really hope you've enjoyed the performances as much as we've enjoyed, the energy you brought here today. And I do encourage you to keep in touch with us, our initiatives and events in future. Our website, rawanee.com, RAWANEE, has details of our past and upcoming initiatives and links to our social media channels, which you can connect with us on. If you'd like to collaborate with us in any way, if you'd like to, reach out, volunteer, or be involved, please don't hesitate to reach out. Our emails are also there. And now for the due thank yous. First of all, I want to thank the talented poets who have contributed their incredibly rich and diverse poems today. For those of you who traveled to join us in person, Margaret, Kathleen, Kelly, and Sarah, it has always been a pleasure to listen to your poems, and today has been no different. And for those of you who have joined us online, in spite of a difference in time zones and busy schedules, Hamad, Nadir, and Shehryar, thank you so much for bringing your energy and talent to this event today. I'm certain that the audience has enjoyed, all of your work as much as I have. So do join me, everyone, in giving a round of applause to these wonderful poets. As it tends to happen with such events, it's often those in the background who are pivotal to making it happen. So I want to say a very, very special thank you to Laiba Khan. Laiba is a talented young girl. She's our administration manager. She's based in Karachi. She's been instrumental in helping put this event together, including the pre-event marketing and administration, helping with the planning, management of Zoom, and being patient with me. So thank you very much, Laiba. And finally, but probably most of all, as you all must know, it is because of the Poetry Society and its very lovely employees that we are here today. So thank you to the director, Judith Palmer. A very special thank you to Natasha Ryan, education manager, who's been working very hard in helping us today. But most of all, thank you to Billy Manning. She's learning and participation coordinator, but more than that, she's an incredible person and somebody who's doing a lot to support poetry. She's been very responsive to the event proposal, proactive in helping us plan. We've coordinated for weeks. There have been lengthy queries, a lot of back and forth, and Billy is the reason we are all here today. And as a special treat to all of you and as a thank you to her, I'm going to sign up now, but Billy is going to recite some of her poetry for you all. So thank you very much for me.
So much, Maniva, and I really want to give Maniva a massive round of applause here. Organising this event, and she has also been very patient with me, and all the back and forth. And thank you, everyone, for coming down to the Poetry Cafe. It's so nice to have you all here and have members from all our different stanzas. It's really amazing to bring everyone together. I'm going to read a quick poem, and then I'm going to chat about some of the events we've got coming up as well. So I wrote this poem in a workshop with Caroline Bird, where she was asking us to write as if we were trapped in our favourite film genre. which is a classic Caroline Byrne kind of thing. So this is called coming of age syndrome. I wake up every morning with one snap of the eyelids, perfectly in time with the beat. Each person on the bus is in love with me. The chess club is helping me accept my sexuality. I have to do a dance routine with my best friend before I enter any building. I skip school for round the town romps without fail. My education is beginning to suffer. I call my mother in the evenings so we can have terrible fights and then tearful reunions. We understand each other better every minute. I break up with my lovers wearing silk tulle organza at all of my 17th birthdays and make up only with the worthy ones. I stand at the side of every car smoking, have that one last party again and again, climb onto a roof for every dawn. I'm so tired, I'm starting to stumble in my Converse. I spend my days standing on the edges of roads in new cities. The sun is always rising. I look around in every direction. No one ever sees which way I go. Thank you so much. And thank you again, Aniba. It's been a really, really wonderful evening.